So, picture this. I walk into the office on a completely normal Tuesday morning, expecting the usual hum of keyboards, the faint aroma of burnt coffee, and maybe Jamie clowning around by the snack table. But nope, instead I freeze right in the doorway because something feels wildly out of place. There's an intense kind of energy buzzing in the air. Not the good kind like when Dave pulls one of his harmless pranks, but more like the, oh no, everything is about to blow up kind of vibe. The first thing I notice is this huge, ominous puddle spreading across the shiny floor near the kitchen. And I'm not talking about a tiny spill. This beast looked like someone had tried to replicate the Great Flood right there by the water cooler. And then I spot it, a suspiciously tilted stack of what looked like the entire office supply inventory. Paper reams leaning dangerously, pens and folders precariously balanced, threatening to avalanche onto the heads of unsuspecting coworkers. A few people are frozen mid-step, eyes darting between the spill and the leaning tower like it's some doomsday scene from a disaster movie. Now, here's where things spiral fast, because I, in my infinite wisdom not precisely a master of grace, decide to take a shortcut through that exact area. And yeah, you guessed it, my foot catches on one rogue pen lying near the edge of this paper mountain. I stumble forward, arms flailing like I'm auditioning for a slapstick comedy. Time seems to stretch as I see the unfortunate tower wobble, then topple, scattering a blizzard of paper and supplies all over the floor. My heart pounds. The office goes silent. Well, almost. I hear a nervous giggle from somewhere behind me, which I later learn was Jamie, but at that moment it felt like the universe was just mocking me. So there I am, knees skinned from an ungraceful landing, papers fluttering around like confetti, and the dreaded oh crap feeling sinking in deep. Everyone's eyes are on me. Linda? Totally still. That's when it hits me like a ton of bricks. How did one tiny misstep turn me from the guy who usually just blends into the background into the center of what's definitely shaping up to be a disaster? And somehow, just like that, I accidentally stepped into what might be the most chaotic mess this office has seen all year. Spoiler alert, that wasn't even the worst part. So, a bit about the place where all this chaos unfolded. Our office is this mid-sized marketing agency, smack dab in the middle of a city that never really seems to slow down, you know? The walls are decked out with random motivational posters that somehow never motivate anyone, more like background noise after a while. Desks cluttered with half-empty coffee mugs, a whole collection of novelty stress balls, and one suspiciously fake plant that no one really believes is alive. That's my usual scene. Now, me? I'm the guy who's perfect at flying under the radar. I come in, do my part on the campaigns, try not to mess anything up too badly, and leave before the late night after office sagas begin. Not that I don't want to jump into the fun sometimes, it's just that I'm not exactly what you'd call office spice. More like the mild sauce you add when you want the flavors but not the heat. Let me introduce you to the real characters who live in this little jungle. First, there's Jamie, my coworker and the unofficial court jester of the place. Jamie's this brilliant creative mind with a grin that's always 2 steps ahead of whatever joke he's about to pull, and fingers quick enough to type out a killer pitch and sneak a prank simultaneously. I'm convinced Jamie has a secret stash of caffeine or maybe some magic potion because he's just that relentlessly upbeat. Then there's Linda. If Jamie is the wild card, Linda is the nuclear button. She's our manager, the kind who treats the office like it's a no-nonsense fortress of productivity. Sharp, precise, and with eyes that seem to see right through any kind of shenanigans. You know the type, clipboard in hand, checklist at the ready, and zero tolerance for anything that smells like wasting time. Honestly, I think she's been programmed to instantly detect a single dropped paperclip within a 5-mile radius. And I can't forget Dave, the office prankster. Unlike Jamie, who has this creative spark, Dave's pranks lean more on the elaborate and occasionally questionable side. Like the time he replaced everyone's desktop backgrounds with photos of confused goats or swapped all the keyboard keys around. The guy can be a menace, but his antics somehow make the 9-to-5 slog a little less gray. Alright, so all of these quirky folks were buzzing around because we were deep into a big project deadline that could pretty much make or break the quarter. I mean, not to be dramatic, but it was one of those campaigns where creativity and timing had to sync perfectly, or our client would think we'd all lost our marbles. The office atmosphere was dense, like that heavy fog you get before a storm, but instead of rain, it was equal parts caffeine jitters and tension. The last few weeks had piled up some pretty messy moments, too. There was the email fiasco where someone accidentally hit reply all on a roast email, and then the printer meltdown that jammed in the middle of a midnight deadline push. So yeah, nerves were fraying and the pressure cooker was starting to whistle. Among the usual hum of keyboard clicks and the occasional sigh, you could almost hear the collective grip tightening. People were walking on eggshells. Any slip-up now might trigger a domino effect of disasters. Linda was lurking in her usual corner office, probably drafting an emergency checklist or glaring at her ticking stopwatch. Jamie, on the other hand, was doing his best to keep things light, tossing around goofy ideas for the campaign to break the tension. Dave had clearly been plotting something mischievous. He kept eyeing the water cooler like it was his next victim. And well, I was trying my very best not to do anything that would single me out. But fate, it seems, had a different plan. So yeah, imagine the swirl of all these personalities and the mounting pressure right before I made my grand entrance into the disaster zone. Honestly, none of us really knew just how tangled up the day was about to get. But one thing was for sure, we were all holding our breath, waiting for the first big wobble that would send everything toppling. So right after I unintentionally unleashed the perfect storm of paper and office supplies, chaos didn't just knock it through the front door wide open and moved in for dinner. My heart was doing this frantic salsa dance, and I'm pretty sure my face was wearing every shade of red known to humans. Jamie immediately appeared beside me, eyes wide but sparkling with that, "oh no, here goes nothing" kind of grin. Okay, he whispered, crouching down to help me pick up the carnage. No, Linda, no, Linda. We can fix this before she sees it. Easier said than done, right? Because, I kid you not, moments after we started scooping up paper like desperate hoarders, the office prankster himself, Dave walks by, his expression somewhere between mischief and, I might have just made things worse. And sure enough, in his hand was a water balloon. Yes, a water balloon. At the water cooler, right next to the scene of the spill. Jamie's eyes locked on Dave's like he was about to detonate a ticking bomb. "Dave, what are you doing? We don't need a flood, remember?" he hissed, barely containing laughter. But Dave just gave this sly shrug like, "Relax, it's all part of my master plan." I was already on thin ice without someone else turning our disaster into a wet mess. But before I could step in, Jamie and I got busy rebuilding the mountain of paper and supplies. We were stacking folders and straightening pens back into their cups with sweaty palms, whispering strategies to each other like Olympic salvage workers. Then, as if the universe was teasing us, I noticed something that made my stomach drop all over again. One of the folders I picked up wasn't just a random piece of office detritus, it was the final version of the campaign pitch. The exact folder Linda had explicitly said could not be touched because, and I quote, "it contains the soul of our project." Great, just great. We looked at each other, and Jamie's grin turned sheepish. Slight problem," he muttered. We gingerly flipped through the folder and realized that our tumble had somehow loosened a crucial printed insert. That little piece contained the client's revised feedback, the secret sauce for our pitch, and basically everything we needed to make the campaign sing. Panic started creeping back in. If that insert got lost or damaged, we were toast. And Linda would not just be mad, she'd probably turn into something out of a stress-induced horror movie. On top of that, Dave, who wasn't done manipulating chaos, gave the water balloon a little squeeze. Splash. The ripple sent a small wave toward our rebuilt stack and that precious folder. Jamie jumped to shield the stack like it was the crown jewels. I'm pretty sure Dave laughed but acted innocent like, "What? It's just water." Muttering frantic apologies to the silent office gods, Jamie and I carefully dried the folder and sat down to reassemble the scattered papers. As we pieced them back together, an unexpected thing happened. We found a sheet of notes Jamie hadn't seen before. It was stuck between the pages and contained an email draft from the client, hinting at last-minute but major changes to the campaign's core message. At first, it felt like just more trouble. But then Jamie's eyes lit up, the way they usually do when he spots a creative opportunity. This could actually save us," he whispered, scrolling through the notes. Now suddenly, we weren't just chasing disaster, we had a lead, maybe even a miracle. But the clock was ticking, Linda's looming presence was omnipresent, and Dave was still smirking somewhere nearby, clearly up to no good. So there we were, drenched paperwork, potential game changer in hand, and hearts pounding with a fragile hope. Could a couple of clumsy office workers outmaneuver the ticking time bomb of a deadline, the wrath of a clipboard-wielding manager, and the unpredictable antics of an office prankster? The moment hung thick like the fog of pre-coffee morning dread. We were either on the verge of a legendary save or a meltdown so spectacular it would be talked about at holiday parties for years, and honestly, I had no idea which side we were headed toward. We took a deep breath. Well, Jamie did. I'm pretty sure I was still hyperventilating and decided to roll with the new information. Our strategy shifted from panic mode to, let's actually try to win this mode. Because yeah, if this hidden email draft was legit, it could flip the entire campaign into something fresher, sharper, and way more in tune with what the client was secretly hoping for. Now, here's the kicker. We needed Linda in on this, but getting her attention without triggering a volcano eruption was the challenge. After all, Linda's "don't disrupt" radar was legendary. So Jamie, ever the smooth talker, volunteered to deliver the news, while I stayed back, furiously reassembling what looked like a shredded manuscript of our hopes and dreams. Jamie swaggered over, carefully clutching the somewhat soggy folder, and found Linda locked in her war room, scribbling notes like a general planning a siege. He cleared his throat, not loudly because, hey, we were operating on a need-to-not-get-fired basis. So, Linda, he started, trying his best to sound both respectful and urgent. We found these new client notes buried in the mess from earlier. It looks like they want to pivot on the campaign's big idea. Linda paused, brows knitting together like she was solving a particularly nasty crossword puzzle. Then she glanced at the folder Jamie held up, eyes flicking to the slightly damp corners. For a split second, the room held its breath. And then, Linda actually smiled. Not one of those forced manager smiles either. It was genuine, almost relieved. Well, I'll be, she said, her tone softer than any of us expected. Maybe this little chaos has some purpose after all. She leaned back, shaking her head like she was recalibrating her entire office playbook mindset. All right, let's regroup and work this angle. Jamie, you and you, she pointed at me from across the room, take the lead on integrating these changes. And Dave? Her eyes narrowed just a bit at the usual suspect for chaos. Keep your water balloons out of my office, got it? Dave raised his hands dramatically, innocent as ever. Hey, just adding some fluid dynamics to the mix? The tension in the room melted faster than I thought possible. Suddenly, what started as a disaster felt like an unexpected windfall. Like maybe the universe was having a laugh, but also handing us a golden opportunity on a silver platter. As Linda herself rolled up her sleeves and got involved in the brainstorming, I realized something pretty cool. We weren't just a team on the verge of losing it. We were a team that managed to stumble into success through a mashup of mishaps, quick thinking, and an odd bit of luck. Jamie's creativity, Dave's chaotic energy, albeit slightly exasperating, Linda's surprising flexibility, and even my accidental blunder had collided into something that actually worked. By the end of the day, the new pitch was polished, aligned perfectly with the client's updated vision, and, most importantly, sent off with plenty of time to spare. The office breathed a collective sigh, some laughter leaked out, and Jamie even gave me a mock salute for most clumsy hero status. Later, as my legs finally stopped protesting from the tumble and chaos, I sat back with a cup of coffee that maybe wasn't quite as burnt as usual and thought about all of it. Maybe being the office hero wasn't about flawless execution or epic moves. Maybe it was just about rolling with the punches, grabbing the unexpected chance when it comes flying at you, and figuring it all out with the people around you. Even if those people include a manager who looks like she's auditioning for the role of a drill sergeant, a prankster who treats the office like his personal playground, and a perpetually over-caffeinated creative genius. So, was this whole adventure a true victory or just a lucky accident? I'll let you decide. But hey, if being clumsy and chaotic can save a big project once in a while, maybe there's a superhero origin story hiding inside all of us. And if nothing else, it definitely makes for one heck of a Tuesday story.